I have a question for you to start off. Why did they wait until after the Tommy Robinson rally to announce the additional charges against the alleged Southport murderer? Why did they wait until Robinson was charged, sentenced, and, in my opinion, rather cruelly and deliberately thrown into solitary in Belmarsh, rubbing shoulders with the very kind of Islamist radicals that he's been warning the British public out? Now, they may well say, oh, Grimesy, this is a mere coincidence. And I'll say, right, because announcing it when public outrage is already boiling over couldn't have possibly been a little bit inconvenient for Starmer and his stormtroopers. And then they pick the day before the budget, of course, when the headlines are primed for pounds and pence, quietly sidelining the terror charge under the radar, out of sight, out of mind. But here's what really gets me. From the moment that they branded this fella Cardiff born, I thought, hang on a minute, something's off here. Now, I know the Welsh can be a little bit boisterous, but even the most fervent Welsh nationalist wouldn't commit such an unspeakable atrocity against a group of young girls at a holiday club, 3 beautiful young girls gone, their young lives snuffed out by unadulterated brutality. This wasn't some typical British crime. You know, you might think of knife crime, you might think of burglary, you might think of aggravated assault, whatever else. These kinds of things that we've come to expect, this wasn't it. This was an attack that feels utterly alien. It ought to feel alien. It ought to feel shocking. And it ought to be filled with a condemnation for what's happening to our country. Because this was an attack filled with hatred that has absolutely no place here in Britain. It's sort of, well, I can't possibly comment on the motives because I'll be in the clink with Tommy. But it's clear to me that the barbarian isn't at the gates anymore. The barbarian is very much here, among us, in your town, in your city, in your home. And yet somehow the authorities were absolutely certain and quick and proud as punch to tell us that this attack wasn't terror-related. And we've heard this before, of course. This is a common cycle of what happens now. But how very convenient. It took until Tuesday to admit that this lad, this Axel Ruda, had allegedly had a stash of ricin, a poison, a deeply, deeply deadly poison, and an Al-Qaeda training manual, the proscribed terrorist organization, and a deadly weapon meant to, of course, strike at the heart of our communities. I wonder, were all of you, each of you, surprised and dismayed by the timing of the announcement?
Yes, 100%. I'm absolutely disgusted by the fact that they always withhold information from us and then they call us conspiracy theorists for pointing out the obvious. Because I made a video about the whole thing that happened way back in, I think it was May. And actually, Tommy Robinson retweeted my video and we got like 500,000 views on X. And for some reason, I don't know if you remember, Chloe, it wouldn't let me upload on Instagram for some reason. Remember that video we kept trying to upload on Instagram? It wouldn't let it upload. And then we uploaded it on X. It got great traction. And I mentioned in that video that, the guy that done the stabbing could be an extremist, right? And then they were saying, oh, you're anti-immigrant, you're lying about the background. They wait for the rally to happen. They wait for Tommy Robinson to come back. They wait for him to be arrested and then thrown in jail. And then all of a sudden, they're happy to tell us about the background of the gentleman that committed those crimes. So it's just absolutely disgusting. And it's not the first time they've done this. They do this all the time.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, on the point of the fact that Tommy has been put in Belmarsh, I mean, the kinds of people that he's alongside, the kind of jihadis that he's been warned against, as I said earlier, I mean, it strikes me as deliberately cruel, actually.
Yeah, this is such a minefield, Darren, and I know I am so frustrated in the position I'm in, and I know the public are as well, because
exactly.
there's so much I would love to say. And I can't believe, first of all, before we get into that we're living in a society where my words will be used against me. It's lawfare, first of all. Let's just remember that since this government is sat in office, that they have weaponized the judicial system like no other political party in history has ever done before. So I'm extremely frustrated. Putting Tommy in prison is a stretch. It's a stretch. Weaponizing the terrorism law, in my opinion, is a stretch. Now, I don't know the facts of the case. I don't know the facts well enough. The police haven't given us a lot of detail, so I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't know what they know that we don't know. But I feel like it's a difficult position for Tommy to be put in prison, in a dangerous prison that is as well. We know there's a lot of extremists in those prisons who are indiscriminate when it comes to challenging those who are also in those prisons with them. I've seen some of the behind the scenes footage. And, I feel like there's a lot this government will have to answer for to the British public about the timing and the, shall I say this carefully, and the way in which they have handled the release of information about the operational decisions and the political decisions that have led up to the information that was released yesterday.
Yes, and I think when we do eventually find that out, and we will, I think it's going to make for interesting reading and I think it could well be pretty damning on Sir Keir Starmer and on Yvette Cooper, who I have to say, as Home Secretary, is my idea of total hell. But Chloe, on the point that Tommy makes there, the admin on Tommy's account, because obviously he can't post on X from Belmarsh, but he says hundreds of the concerned British public are currently sitting in prison, violent and sexual criminals freed to make way for them. Peter Lynch died. Of course, you did a video on Peter Lynch, actually, and many have argued he was a political prisoner and his life has been taken completely without any justification or any semblance of justice within that decision to imprison him, given what we now potentially know. And he says, the admin says, Tommy Robinson is in maximum security prison and the family who attacked the police at Manchester Airport still haven't been charged. It does get people on to the element of there is a two-tier justice system at play here.
I mean, I don't even think it's a question anymore, unless they are insanely incompetent. I mean, there's just no way that you can justify people being thrown behind bars at the snap of a fingers for Facebook posts, whilst these guys at Manchester Airport, we've got the CCTV footage. Maybe there are a few questions, but I think it's very clear to me that those are bad guys that did a bad thing. They beat up a woman, absolutely disgusting in my eyes. How are they still walking the streets? How haven't they been charged at all? It just doesn't make sense. And then the timing of it all, as we say, the timing is very suspicious. And Dominic Cummings put up a good tweet on this, yes. saying that number 10 will have known about what's come about the Southport stabber. They will have known that right from the start, but they kept it from us. And as you say, Darren, Richard Tice raises a very good question there, and Keir Starmer tried to walk his way out of it and suggest that Richard Tice is stopping the police from doing their job. But as Richard says, the advice has been to the government, it sounds like, that information that is important like that should not be withheld. And then when it may just be pure coincidence, the timing of this coming, say, right by the budget, thinking, we'll distract them with the budget so that this doesn't become, another riot or something. There's that. But then also with the Tommy situation, I don't know for sure, but I think there's a question to be asked of, is it a coincidence that this has come out sort of just after Tommy's been put behind bars? It may not be a coincidence. They may have done that on purpose, waited for him to be put behind bars so that he can't start tweeting about it.
Yeah.
I think can I just piggyback very quickly off the back of that from Chloe? I think the question mark is whether it was done deliberately before the rally was taking place. As you know, there were comments from journalists and media outlets about a week ago considering releasing this story. There was also confirmation that the trial had been postponed through Guido Fawkes by a week. And so there's some serious questions there. Why does that happen? And let's, Chloe, you raised a really great point. I was tweeting about this earlier. On what earth does the Home Secretary, does MI5 not know this man has downloaded potentially terrorist materials and was potentially allegedly creating a biological weapon? How was that not found out within hours of his arrest? Either the government didn't, genuinely only found out recently as they said they had, in which case there is utter incompetence at the top, or they did know and have kept it out of public domain, which, in my opinion, is lying to the face of the British public.
But just to play devil's advocate, and this is because I come from a background of being regulated by bloody Ofcom, but the police would say we do not want to jeopardise the court case. We do not want to see this man get off scot-free because of the fact that someone has prejudiced the case, whereas the jury hears something that may cloud and bias their view on the trial or of the individual, and therefore the merits of the legal argument against him would be rendered unsafe. So they would argue that actually that is a robust principle, that, you know, the right to a fair trial absolutely has to be sacrosanct. I mean, what would you say to that argument? Are you is commentary on this area in general just totally out of proportion?
Well, look, there's always a legal argument to be made, and I want to be very clear that I'm not trying to subvert the court of justice or the trial in any way, shape, or form. I'm asking operational questions about the government's handling of the situation that's completely separate from whether the suspect is guilty or not. It is whether the government have withheld information that should be in public domain. Let's not forget that it's only recent precedent that the British police have not released information to the public. For many, many other incidents, the British public have been informed very quickly. So I'm asking operational questions about the government's handling of the situation, not about whether the man in question has done anything right or wrong. He is innocent until proven guilty under a court of law, and so should be.
And I tell you what, if you can manage to get through 2,000 of the so-called far-right protesters into courts in 24 hours, and you can turn around those kinds of time frames, then why are we waiting until January of next year for the court case of this individual who is allegedly the murderer of young girls? Why is that?
And Manchester Airport as well, still waiting.
Manchester Airport, and Andy points out as well, Nick Lowles of Hope Not Hate hasn't felt the arm of the law for his false tweets about acid attacks against Muslims that were made during said riots. And he even got a Channel 4 documentary series for his trouble. You know, they said, oh, well, Tommy Robinson, you know, told a few untruths. Nick Lowles told a few untruths, but we like Nick Lowles, so we don't like Tommy Robinson, so we'll give Nick Lowles a documentary. It's not a two-tier justice. It's a two-tier society that we live in.
No, it's just corruption at the very highest level. And obviously, they're doing this on purpose. And if people are clever and smart, they can see through this. They withheld information in order to be able to frame people like Tommy Robinson and the far right in a certain way, whilst they were the ones speaking the truth. And it's a two-tier policing, because obviously they didn't want to come out and say this guy has terrorist materials on his phone, because it would prove people like Tommy Robinson right. And they couldn't prosecute him, they couldn't throw him in jail.
Well, he was found guilty of contempt of court. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That is true. Because it's a big crime, by the way, contempt of court, lying in courts. But you know,
the court heard from Aidan in the Tommy case, Aidan Eardie Casey, that this was most egregiously expressed through a documentary that Tommy displayed in Trafalgar Square, which three of us in this chat were at. And for Robinson's defence, the KC representing Tommy said that he was a journalist committed to bringing more information into the public, who passionately believed in freedom of expression and the freedom of the press. But there was one aspect of, and this is from Charlie Peters from GB News, by the way, and I'm, to be perfectly frank, quite surprised that this article is on their website, but hey-ho. And he says, one aspect of the mitigation submission stood out in particular, how Robinson had fared during his last stint in prison. He was previously jailed for another contempt of court breach after incidents at the Crown Court sitting in Canterbury and Leeds, a period of 3.5 months in which it was said that Robinson was held in solitary confinement. Now, Charlie points out that technically there's no such thing in British prison systems, but some prisoners are held in a more limited condition, either for their own safety or if they pose a greater risk to the prison population. Now, Robinson was held in such conditions during that last stint, and they had a massive impact on his mental health. He had depression, anxiety, other mental health struggles. They were all read out in a court of law, which must have been pretty difficult for him in general. But now he's held in a court with some of the world's most dangerous killers and terrorists, Islamists that seek to radicalize others, kept in isolation, and the double category AA wing houses, though prisoners who can't be trusted to exist peacefully alongside others. A contempt of court charge, really?
Yeah.
Though, is this the kind of environment he should be held in this position? I just find that, I think that is a brutalization, a weaponization of the system, and I don't think anyone can reasonably argue that that is fair or just in any sense of the word.
But they don't do that on purpose, though. They are doing it on purpose. Sorry, Chloe, I'm just saying they're doing it on purpose. They're trying to kill him. Like, they're trying to put him in prison, in the most dangerous prison, and they want other prison inmates to attack him. As a matter of fact, where he was living in London when he was free was one of the most heavily concentrated Muslim populations in that area. So why are you putting him there when he could get attacked? So it's very obvious. I know one of his bodyguards, or one of the guys that does close protection for him, is this guy called Vaughan. And he said they're doing this on purpose because they are trying to kill him. The same concept applies when he goes to prison.
So if you listen to if you listen to, it's really interesting, the Jordan Peterson podcast with Tommy, where he goes in depth and talks about his previous prison experiences. So he says he was in a prison where he was perfectly fine. There were, little to no Islamist gangs there that were going to threaten him. He could, roam around the prison without any problem. And then one day they just came in and announced, we're moving you to this other prison, one filled with these gangs that, are really out to get him. Yeah. And he was asking, why are you moving there? Why are you moving me there? And, they just wouldn't give him a reason, just arbitrarily. They're like, no, we're going to move you to this horrible one where you're going to be attacked. And they he claims in the podcast that they then put him in a room with one of these gangs and just allowed them to literally beat the shit out of him. They knocked his teeth out, and then he was in his room, which he couldn't leave. He was terrified to leave, and he wouldn't eat any of the food at the prison because he was so scared that it was going to be poisoned. So the only food that he would eat was the amount of tin tuna that he could afford to buy with the coppers that he had. And he lost something like 30 kilos whilst he was in there because he was so scared to touch the proper food. I mean, you would think that this man is, they've used terrorist charges, you'd think that he is some awful, horrendous terrorist, or, someone who's gone on some sort of homicide mission and killed a load of people. No. This is a journalist we're talking about. We're talking about a journalist exposing grooming gangs. You may not completely love the guy and think he's perfect, but I mean, can we all agree that this is very, very out of proportion punishment?
Definitely. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.